we take testing and evaluating our own products incredibly seriously. And I think it's a really important part of why we built such an effective product. Co-counsel as a product should behave not unlike I have just onboarded a new great legal assistant or even associate to my firm. How would I want that person to behave in terms of getting me information, for example? There is such a thing as the overeager assistant or associate that gives you way too much information. Whether you care about defending large companies and you're worked in that kind of context, or if you care about individual defendants, or you care about people pursuing justice, making access to justice faster, more effective, more efficient, and empowering lawyers with tools to make them do that, I think is a really exciting mission.
Hey everyone, I'm Ryan from vals.ai, and today I'm really excited to be joined by Jake Heller. Jake Heller is the CEO and co-founder of Casetext. Casetext was initially started to help litigators find legal authorities to help win their cases more quickly and often. They were able to get early access to GPT-4 before the public was aware of it, and quickly transitioned the company to focus very heavily on developing on this technology, releasing their product Co-Counsel, which is one of, if not the first, legal AI product at using generative AI. That caught the attention of Thomson Reuters, as well as a lot of lawyers in practice, and they were acquired for $650 million in 2023. Thanks so much, Jake, for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
To get this started, I think the audience is a little bit aware of vlair and this project that we're running. What was your interest in participating in the study?
There are a few things. First, we take testing and evaluating our own products incredibly seriously. And I think it's a really important part of why we built such an effective product. And what we were seeing internally was the product operating at a very high level. We're also seeing that with our clients. And so, opportunities to independently verify and show that through like a third party, I think was really, really good. But also we generally support the third party independent testing of these products. And I think that it's only good for the industry for people to have a clear-eyed sense of how well the products do stacked up against each other, and also how well the products do stacked up against human performance. And we're excited that this study in particular looked at both.
Nice. Maybe let's unpack that a little bit more. Why do vendors in particular have something to benefit from participating in a study like this?
I mean, there's maybe the obvious one, which is, we can claim we're the best all we want. I mean, claim that we're very accurate all we want, but people don't really believe you unless it's done by an independent third party that is evaluating things at least somewhat, objectively. And so that's kind of one thing. The other thing, kind of more subtly, is, we are creating tests and evaluating ourselves in all different kinds of ways. We've hired lawyers who are very good at what they do to write tests for us. We're working with our clients, but to the extent that we get even more and different perspectives on how these tools might be used in the real world and what the legal profession is expecting out of these tools, it is much to our benefit to get those perspectives and integrate them eventually into improving our capabilities and our tools.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you mentioned you have a very rigorous testing process within Casetext, and that, I think, what I've heard has been a key part of how the product's been developed since the start. Can you speak to a little bit why it's so challenging to test these products effectively?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of challenges. The most basic part of it is you want your test to look as much as possible like the real world. And when a lawyer or a legal professional is using one of these tools, you want your test to look a lot like the questions they'd be asking, the documents they'd be uploading, and most importantly, that the answers are the answers that they'd expect or desire. They're fully complete, or they hit on all the right points. And creating tests in almost like a lab environment to look at the real world is itself hard. Just because lawyers do an extremely varied amount of work product across different kinds of documents, from medical records to transcripts to discovery to everything else. And so kind of anticipating all the different needs of the tool at the start is itself very challenging. The bigger challenge is, real success is when a lawyer uses your tool in their work to get something real done as part of their real workflow. And the real workflow for lawyers oftentimes includes going from places like Thomson Reuters' Westlaw and Practical Law to communicating with co-counsel to talking with a colleague. And the real test is whether their job is done better, done faster, or however they evaluate success, speed, accuracy, the deep depth intelligence of an answer. And as part of the work, for example, when we do tasks like researching or evaluating documents, an AI may actually be most helpful if it provokes a lot of good ideas and thoughts, or gives them a lot of resources and information to follow up on, even if it doesn't do the full job itself, even perfectly or completely, because that's what real work looks like. You're using this AI assistant as an assistant, not to do the full job.
It makes a lot of sense. We actually saw something about how there was a real interest in developing products that cited their sources, but an inadvertent effect of that was that you would end up in these situations where lawyers would receive many more citations than they would actually expect,
Yeah.
and have to spend more time to manually check each one of them, making sure that they were accurate before moving forward and sending something like that to their colleague. So I think it's really hard to get a sense of what exactly the sweet spot is between some of these factors of accuracy and citations and speed to response. How do you try and balance some of these perspectives that you hear from different law firms or users that are using the same product?
Yeah, it's a great question. And first of all, the way we think about this is that co-counsel as a product should behave not unlike I have just onboarded a new great legal assistant or even associate to my firm. How would I want that person to behave in terms of getting me information, for example? There is such a thing as the overeager assistant or associate that gives me way too much information and ends up making my life a little bit harder in some ways than making it easier. So there's a balance to strike there. And the balance to strike is almost like, how do you, in the pre-AI world, how would you define exactly what a human would do in these circumstances? And that's generally our guiding star. One of the things we found, though, is we do provide a lot of citations. We try to make the assistant or the associate cite to everything it possibly can that where it says something that needs a citation, it should cite to it. And what we've found is that there are way more citations than a person could reasonably check. And what people have tended to do is they use their intuition about what are the areas that really matter to the work that they're doing right now, and their intuition about what might feel even a little bit off, and they need to like double check, kind of double take on that sentence. Like, did they really say this in the discovery? Like, I need to look at that. And then the email actually says that, and they go, oh wow, okay, that's going to be the key fact in this trial or whatever, right? So what we found is that as people got more comfortable working with their AIs, they understand that it will cite basically everything, that can be cited, which I think is a good thing. It gives them the opportunity with a single click to evaluate the source. But they have gone to a place now where they don't feel like they have to. The people who are experienced with this don't feel like they have to check every single citation, just the ones that matter most for them. And that's also, by the way, where human judgment and intelligence and experience come into play while using these AI tools. The AI is just an assistant. It's just going to serve up information, answer your questions dutifully, for the most part, incredibly accurately and thoroughly, even more so than working with some people, right? And that's what the study shows. But at the same time, it's just an assistant. And we really emphasize that folks do the extra work of again, applying their intuition based on their experience about what matters most, where to dig in deeper, and how to approach the next step. In the future, I think we're going to add more and more customization. So we can tell the AI, and you can even do this today through just talking to it, just give the answer to a sentence, or just give it to me in a paragraph, or just, only cite the sources about X, Y, and Z, and it'll do a pretty good job of that already.
Interesting. Yeah. And I'm sure there's a lot of interest in having firms tailor some of these tools to their use cases. One of the things that we find is that it's hard to quantify exactly what good looks like across an industry. In a study like this, we're looking for a baseline level of accuracy across the tools.
Yeah.
And I wonder if some of the challenge with benchmarking in the first place is finding consensus around what good looks like.
That's right. That's right. And like I said earlier, imagine you've hired an assistant or associate to your law firm. Well, law firms look for different things in different people. I was rejected by plenty of law firms and accepted by a few. And
It works out.
yeah, it worked out in the end. Yeah. And I think they're just looking for different things. And it's honestly, it's not even a firm to firm thing. It's a person to person thing. Law firms have a lot of different partners in them and a lot of different, senior, junior associates, et cetera, each of whom have different preferences for how they would prefer to be worked with, and what the kind of level of speed versus quality trade-off, the level of depth of information versus conciseness trade-off. These are all difficult and individual and personal preference things. And I think ultimately these tools, like a good person you're working with, will get your feedback. Be like, okay, I remember now that I work with Jane. She does not like it when I give her 10 paragraphs. She only likes 1 paragraph. Understood. Moving forward, I'm going to try to keep my answers concise, right? For example.
Right.
And I think that, and unless stylistically there might be, on this case, we know it's, though not usually a very important topic to look into topic A, B, C, or X, Y, Z about the fraud. But for this case, it's a very important topic, and any mention of it at all is super sensitive and important, so I'll flag it. So that kind of personalization at the matter level or the person level, I think will become increasingly important as time goes on.
Interesting. Yeah. Taking a step back a little bit, we were talking a little bit about how benchmarking has a potential to have a lot of value for the industry, and we focused at it from the vendor perspective. How do you think law firms stand to gain from having industry reports like this?
I mean, I think there's a lot of ways. Maybe the most important is we've never been in a moment like this before in legal technology where it's so easy to create a compelling demonstration, a demoable product, where if you're a partner at a law firm or a chief knowledge officer or a chief information officer, et cetera, someone can walk into your office and show you something that will just knock your socks off. Can't believe that my computer just did X, Y, and Z. But it turns out that although it's very easy to create a great demo, it's very hard to create a product that actually works, but consistently and well across many different kinds of inputs. And you can't evaluate that from the buyer perspective, from the law firm perspective, or the government perspective, or whomever's looking at this. You can't evaluate that in a 30-minute meeting when you're talking to the vendor and they're showing you an amazing demo. The only way to evaluate that before these kinds of independent benchmarks is just trying the product yourself over the course of weeks. That's a serious investment in time. And I think those kinds of serious investments of time should be reserved for some baseline level of qualification and performance that I think independent studies like vals and presumably others, but others that you may all do, will help people get a sense of okay, what should I like kind of filter out? Who should I be talking to? What should I be looking at? And what is worth it for me to invest the weeks of time into really investing, my people's time, my time in evaluating these technologies in my firm or in my government setting.
Right. And then we saw the term emerge more frequently of pilot fatigue.
Yeah.
Where these firms who are used to piloting maybe 1 or 2 products at a time are now piloting 3 or more.
Yeah.
And being stretched really thin with the level of lawyer involvement to get these tools tested in the first place.
And the challenge, for its worth, is there are also a lot of new really good products. And so in some ways, I think law firms will have to get used to, if they're interested in using the most advanced, the best products, they're going to see probably more and more now today because of AI. I mean, it's making it easier, yes, to build a great demo, but also easier to build a really compelling product that actually really works. And so I do think, unfortunately or fortunately for them, they're going to have a lot of things to look at and a lot of things to try. But it do need some sort of filter and some heuristic to know, okay, if I'm going to be spending all this time doing these pilots, which ones should I actually even look at?
Well, that's a good point. How do you at Casetext, Thomson, Reuters stay dynamic in a field that's changing so quickly? New foundation models are coming out, new companies are being announced with applications of generative AI. Are there particular ways that you stay dynamic?
There are a few things. The first and most important thing is it's all based on the customer and what they need. And one thing that we really pride ourselves when we were just Casetext, and I think is like 10x now at Thomson Reuters, is we're very deeply connected to our customers, and we have a lot of customers. And we know, I think with great precision, exactly what they're looking for and exactly what they're trying to accomplish. We can empathize that in part because a lot of us had practiced law for many years for some of us. And so I know exactly what they mean when they ask for X, for X feature, or for Y addition, or to fix the whatever bug it might be. And so we filter through all this kind of onslaught of news through, okay, how could this actually solve real problems for our customers? Sometimes things come out and they seem really exciting and people get really excited about it in the machine learning and artificial intelligence communities, but it does not pass our filter of this is actually going to be something that's important for lawyers or to solve the real problems that our attorneys are trying to solve. And sometimes in unexpected ways, new model capabilities open up entirely new pathways for us to support our customers. For example, a lot of litigators that go to trial have been dreaming about a AI that listens in on the trial and can do things like research when the witness is on the stand, they say something on a particular hot topic. It does research so that I can challenge that witness on that topic. Didn't you say the other thing earlier, right? The way it happens right now is people just use their memory. I think she said something different, right? And they kind of look through their files manually, but this could all be automated. And you can have literally a cell phone sitting on the table with you, listening in. And until very recently, that was like science fiction, totally impossible. And now as these models become more and more multimodal, which is to say they can hear and see and do all these other capabilities, all of a sudden, that's like a real possibility. And so we can go back to the litigators who've been asking for this, you know, since we came out with co-counsel 2 years ago, and say, oh, actually, we said that was impossible, but now we think there's a solution here, and we're going to explore that with you. So I think that again, it starts with just being. The other thing too is, okay, we were a very small company, we got acquired. We're now a much larger company, but we have to keep a startup ethos, and we just work really, really hard, really fast, and that's part of it. It is a rapidly changing environment. The state of the art gets pushed out every single week. A lot of the times that does have an impact to our customers. And because they have that close customer connection, we know exactly where these model capabilities or new advancements, what they mean. And we just have to move super fast on them. And, one of the hard parts about the evaluation you all did, for example, is that's a moment in time. And 3 weeks from now, these products will be different. And a year from now, these products will be different. And so, obviously we feel great about how we did in that moment in time. It seems like there's a class of very high performing products, of which we're part of them. And we hope to still be there in 6 months and 9 months and 12 months, because things are going to change so rapidly that the state of the art and how things advance. It takes a lot of effort to push hard and work fast to stay there.
Right. And we're working just as hard and fast to try and keep up with the new ways that we can evaluate and test these tools as well. I think you bring up a good point here, which is that this study necessarily needs to repeat to stay relevant for its consumers. And we have the opportunity to expand the scope and modify the ways we do evaluation, or the ways that you'd like to see benchmarking, particularly in legal, change in the future.
Well, the one real wish that's much harder to do is to really emulate real world experiences. And this would require, I think, having real associates working with real product over the course of many, weeks, and then having sort of evaluation, like kind of a control group that didn't have the AI and the test group that did, and who did the better job, who did the faster job, evaluate, like the client would evaluate those attorneys. I don't know if that's near term possible. I do think like there are ways we can advance in the short term. Like, from my understanding of the study, for example, longer answers tended to do pretty well because they're really thorough,
Right.
but we weren't really looking at whether there are hallucinations introduced in the longer answers, for example, or whether even customers prefer longer answers. And so, getting that balance right is very difficult. And I think making those kinds of evaluations for you guys is again, finding what good is very, very hard. I'm sure you guys will continue to fine tune that as time goes on and get into a better place there.
Right. We certainly hope to. Bring up hallucinations. I think that's a word that's gotten the attention of a lot of lawyers, and probably created a lot of fear to adopting any of these tools, particularly when you see reports that come out indicating really high rates of hallucination, and then maybe overly ambitious marketing material that shows zero hallucination or something of that sort. How do you manage hallucinations at Thomson Reuters? How do you think about overcoming this issue for the industry?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that first and foremost, like, what are hallucinations really? It's when the model says something, asserts something to be true that does not happen to be true. And the first thing is it's much more likely to happen in a circumstance when you're just talking directly to a model, for example, just communicating directly with ChatGPT or other consumer tools that until very recently didn't have any sources of information to go off of except for basically what they've memorized in their training, right? So it's like, imagine you're giving a test to a student. It's a closed book exam. They've read a lot, so they're very smart. These models have read a lot. So they're very smart and very knowledgeable. But it's a closed book exam. They're operating entirely from memory. And it's like partial credit. So they're like really want to answer something,
Right.
Even if it might be wrong. And that's how these models sort of behave behind the scenes. They really want to answer something. It's a partial credit exam. When you make that same exam open book and you give it, and I think something that we're excited about Thomson Reuters is we can uniquely give it, really trusted, robust content, whether that be the Westlaw databases, practical law, or the many other dozens of databases and treatises that Thomson Reuters has accumulated over the course of decades. When you supply the AI, it's like, hey, read this first. Before you answer, read this section of a treatise, read this example contract, read these practical practice notes from some of the best practicing attorneys in the country. Read that first and then answer is much less likely in that open book exam kind of circumstance to give you something that is like wrong or misleading. So it's like level one is making sure it has the right information in front of it. And I think that's something you'll see even more from Thomson Reuters in the years that come, is a deeper and deeper integration of literally billions of pages of information that I would argue Thomson Reuters has the best in the world, if not one of the best in the world, collections of information and content. And then there's also a lot of work you do behind the scenes between the time that the user asks the AI a question and the time the response comes back. There are many checks and guardrails, and a lot of work has gone into how the information is presented to the AI and how the prompt behind the scenes is being posed to the AI. All that really, really matters. And you can get from a baseline of something that looks pretty bad, if you're just talking to ChatGPT, and a lot of research is done around just communicating directly with these models. You can go from a place where it like looks pretty bad to actually a place that's very, very, very good. But to your point, it's impossible to avoid all errors and all mistakes of any type in these kinds of AI applications. And in fact, the same is true when you're working with people. If only there's a person I could hire who never makes any mistakes, never misreads something, never, thinks they know something. I was talking to my mom the other day, and she's like, "Oh, I heard that you should take Advil instead of ibuprofen with this topic." And she told us this thing that. It's exactly wrong, and that happens even in professional settings. And so I think that the important thing for lawyers to consider, even when they're working with these great products that do, in some cases, superhuman levels of accuracy and thoroughness, is that there's still the margin and opportunity for some type of error. And the key is to use your judgment, dig into the sources, and again, they're always really well cited for you. To if something seems off, dig deeper, ask a follow-up question to the AI, or dig into the materials yourself. And ultimately, the lawyer is there, working with this AI assistant, not unlike the way that you'd work with a junior person at your law firm or your government agency or company. Take it like it's very useful to have these people do the first cut or first run of the research or the review, but you need to always dig deeper, ask the follow-up questions, and evaluate for yourself.
Even this study, we saw that the lawyers made mistakes. I mean, there was some evidence we saw of a miscopy paste, like just it was a miscopy into this for the citation that was being produced. So the wrong citation was pulled, and mistakes like that do happen in practice. So I think you're right to say that our standard for accuracy should be reflective of how entry-level associates do their work, not necessarily as superhuman or 100%.
I mean, look, internally, we obviously want to be 100%, right? And that's what our customers, I think, want from us as well. And so we're going to keep on pushing until we're as darn close to 100% as possible. And I think that's the standard we should hold ourselves to in the industry. But it is true that there's no perfect system right now, neither human nor computer, to do all these tasks. And that's just the messy world we live in.
Right. Well, you also talked about the work you did to build on top of a base chatbot like ChatGPT and making it a more vertical specific legal tool. I think this is actually a really big point of confusion for a lot of lawyers. We've heard that use of ChatGPT in an unofficial setting in law firms is pretty common.
Yeah.
And so one of the main differences you've talked to is how the data can be so different that results in fundamentally different and more accurate answers. Are there other ways that the legal specific AI tools have advantages over using a base ChatGPT product?
Yeah. So again, to emphasize, the content is a really, really important piece of it. One way to think about that before moving on to the other ways these tools are different, one way to think about that is law firms today pay a lot of money for access to tools like LexisNexis, Bloomberg, and Westlaw, because they believe that their associates with access to that information are going to do a lot better than those that don't have that information, right? So that's reflected also in how their AI associates or assistants perform. And I believe pretty strongly that the same level assistant or associate with access to, say, like Google, is going to do, at the end of the day, a lot worse of a job than an assistant or associate with access to world-class leading content like the type that these companies like Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis and Bloomberg are able to provide. Bias, but I think Thomson Reuters is some of the world's best content. It's why we chose to work with them on this. And I think that's going to make more and more and more of a difference for these professional tools as time goes on. But there are many other things too. When you're working with ChatGPT from a technical perspective, you're basically just talking to it and it's immediately spitting back an answer. And anybody who's worked with these legal AIs knows that it's very rarely an immediate response. Sometimes it thinks for 20, 30 seconds longer before it gives a response back. And what's happening there usually is a number of steps that are there to hopefully guarantees maybe the wrong word, but get to a place where it's going to have a lot more thorough, deep, accurate answer. These things include setting up the information presented to the AI in a level of prompting and instructions that we add that make it do a lot better job. And that's part of what we test it very vigorously. There are very oftentimes, multiple different invocations of the AI to look at the same information from different angles. There are oftentimes guardrails in place. Some of them are more classic machine learning models. Some of them are these new AI models that will evaluate the output as it's being generated. Is the citation correct? Is it supporting what is it saying what we say it's saying? Is there more information we might be missing? Let's do a thoroughness check. In one of our applications, for example, after it finishes the first run of looking through all the information, it then will, ask itself, did I catch everything? And then read through it again, and then read through it again until it feels like it's not missed any important information. And that's part of how we get it to be so thorough. And so you see this kind of across the board when you're working with these legal applications. The ones that I think are at the top of the line are very rarely just a kind of direct conversation with the model. Information kind of immediately comes out back at you. There's a lot of steps in between to ensure that the results are as high quality as possible.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's why, fundamentally, the data divide is so huge, but also a single consumer product can't necessarily be taken to every enterprise application like that.
Yep.
We were talking a little bit before we got started today that there's been a real surge in interest in legal, especially from technologists and engineers. And I wonder if you have a perspective on why we've seen that, why legal in particular has garnered so much attention from folks interested in generative AI.
I think there's a few reasons. I think the first reason is the first wave of these models that got really good were language models. And if you think, where can I commercially use a model that's really good at language? There are very few places that are better than law. Law is a approximately $1 trillion a year industry worldwide. A lot of the work that's done is done based on reading, analyzing, understanding, researching text. And so there's like a match made in heaven for these application of these AIs to the legal profession. And I think the thing that's really exciting and why I'd encourage people to continue to lean in is, even if these models got no more capable than they are today, even if all the labs completely stop their work, there's probably a decade worth of stuff to build in the legal industry that can provide extremely high value. So I think that they're not wrong to be interested.
Part of that decade is probably training lawyers as well to be better practitioners.
Absolutely. It's both sides. From a product development perspective, you can get increasingly niche, let's build products that work well for patent lawyers or for estate lawyers or for family lawyers. Again, these models are getting increasingly multimodal. They can be with you in trial, in a deposition, in the negotiating room with another, to negotiate the deal terms for whether it be a Series A or an M&A contract. All of these things are, I think, really, really exciting. And again, with current model capabilities, a lot of untapped potential. And so I think that's one reason. And I think the other reason is there's just been a few companies, we're one of them, and Harvey's another great example of that, who made great products. And it gets people excited and interested when you see that there's really good products actually out there. And the truth is, about this current wave of AI, we're so early in it that there are way more products than there are good products, and way more examples of people tinkering and trying stuff. And there are commercially viable, successful, growing businesses around this. And people are taking note that this is one of the shining areas of real success of using AI, not in a hypothetical way, not as a cool post on Twitter, but as something that people are actually using day in, day out in their practice. And so I think that gets people excited that they can do take their passion for AI, their knowledge about large language models, and apply it to something that will really be used by real people. And maybe the final reason is, law for some people is pretty boring, but I think for the right people, it's super exciting. Even before large language models, the people who would apply for jobs with us were the kinds of people who saw how important the justice system is, who know that there's a huge gap between the number of people who need help and the people who get great help in the legal services industry. And I think there's a really compelling mission. We felt this for a very long time, to provide better legal services across the board. And I think for the right people, that gets them really excited about applying technology to solve a real problem, whether it be criminal defendants who have no money, not getting the best representation because their lawyers, though great, are super overworked, because it's all we can provide for public defenders. Or whether it be even at a company, like when you work at these large companies, sometimes they get sued and they settle lawsuit, not because they're wrong, but because it just costs so much money to litigate. And so the truth, frustratingly, never comes out, and they have to feel like they have to sign over $1 million check to somebody who may actually not be suing them for the right reasons. And so on all sides of this, whether you care about defending large companies and you're worked in that kind of context, or if you care about individual defendants, or you care about people pursuing justice, making access to justice faster, more effective, more efficient, and empowering lawyers with tools to make them do that, I think is a really exciting mission.
I completely agree. I think I can see it at all points of the legal landscape, how groups can become more efficient at achieving their goals and outcomes. I wonder if that creates a deflationary effect, though, on legal services, if we're able to achieve the same outcomes more easily, or achieve new outcomes that weren't even possible with smaller payroll.
So there's this great concept from economics called Jevons paradox, I think. And paradoxically, the more you make something more cheap, easy to access, efficient, what have you, you tend to see people consume it more, and consume it so much more that it's completely countered the effect of, a great example, a simple example of this is like computers used to be really expensive and really big. And that industry was tiny when that was the case. It was like just research labs. And as computers have gone smaller and smaller and smaller, so it's on your wrist or in your pocket, way more people are buying, computers now than they ever were before, even though they're way more powerful, way cheaper by comparison to the room-sized ones they used to have 60, 70 years ago. And I think the same is going to be true of legal services. There are just so many things that we aren't doing today because they're too expensive or too time-consuming. And it's simple stuff. Even me, as I was running my business, as a lawyer, I would get contracts sometimes, and I would say, should I show this to my lawyer? I don't have the time or money to do that, so I'm going to read it myself, or take a risk and kind of sign it after reading it pretty, not as carefully as I probably would like it to be read, right? Like I said earlier, there are times when companies are sued and they believe they're actually in the right, but companies are people, or small businesses or anything. They're sued and they think they're in the right, but they go, well, it's going to cost me $1 million to defend this, so I may as well just settle it for $500,000. And so that's an unused amount of legal services that could have been used if it were faster, more effective, more efficient. I think that another kind of small example here is there's a certain threshold under which it does not make sense to acquire a business, right? But the company is just too small, and the amount is too small. You end up paying your lawyers more than you're paying the company you're acquiring. And so it becomes, a lot of business unions that should be don't end up happening, because just the legal costs are too extreme. And so these are just a few examples, and you kind of multiply that by 10,000 or 1 million across the entire legal industry and across the world. And I think that you're going to see a lot more people using legal services, whether it be simple contract review all the way to complex M&A, litigation, et cetera, because it's more effective and more efficient, because now you finally have the time and the money to do it.
Great. Okay, well, I think that's a great place to leave off.
Cool.
Thanks so much for joining me, Jake from Thomson Reuters, and looking forward to sharing the results of the full study with everyone very shortly.